Deepti faced intense panic when a car accident shattered her life. Trapped in the wreckage, she saw her broken thigh bone protruding through her skin, and blood gushing from her legs. Frantically, she asked for her husband, but no one had answers. The traumatic surgeries and severe pain added to her despair, and she felt abandoned by her husband's family, who showed no concern. As she struggled through recovery, her husband's indifference shattered her emotionally. The fear of losing her legs and facing an uncertain future further escalated her anxiety, making her feel completely helpless and alone.
Deepti Khurana was a woman from Punjab, a state known for its generous and loving people. When they loved someone, they did so wholeheartedly. Deepti's story was one that she never imagined would unfold in the way it did. She started working at a young age, earning well for herself. One day, a marriage proposal came her way. She met the man, and soon plans for an arranged marriage were set in motion. Within 2 months, they were married. Deepti was overjoyed, as if she were on cloud 9. It seemed that her dream had come true, a dream she had cherished since childhood, of getting married. The wedding preparations were done to perfection. Shopping, jewelry, there was nothing she hadn't bought. She felt content that nothing was left undone. Everything had been done with great care and enthusiasm. After all, Punjabi weddings were known for their extravagance. Her wedding was no different, filled with fancy decorations and grand celebrations. However, just a month after the wedding, her husband's behavior began to change. He started telling her that he was going to the office and that she shouldn't leave the house. Deepti questioned him, asking, "Why? What happened that I can't step outside?" He replied, "You've come from Chandigarh, and you're modern. People will look at you differently." Then, one day, when Deepti mentioned she needed to buy some groceries for the kitchen, he told her, "Don't go to the market alone. We'll go together when I return." At that time, Deepti thought her husband was very caring. It felt like the kind of young love one experiences at the age of 22. She believed that her husband was someone who truly cared about her. A few months after their marriage, Deepti found out she was pregnant. The couple visited the doctor, who confirmed the pregnancy. Deepti was overjoyed upon hearing the news. Excitedly, she began stitching loose-fitting suits and telling everyone she was pregnant. They had already gone through 3 checkups when something strange happened that day. On their way back from a checkup, her husband, instead of driving carefully, steered the car straight into a pothole. At that very moment, Deepti suddenly started feeling intense pain. She rushed to the restroom and realized she was bleeding. The joy of her pregnancy quickly turned into sorrow as she experienced a miscarriage. Their first child was lost just like that. Deepti immediately asked her husband to take her to the doctor. They went to the doctor, but Deepti was confused and unsure of what was happening, of who was saying what. The doctor explained that she would have to undergo an abortion, or else toxins would spread inside her body. Deepti couldn't comprehend what was happening to her. She was still an innocent girl who hadn't even fully enjoyed her marriage. She had been planning her honeymoon, but suddenly she was dealing with a miscarriage and an abortion. It was all too much for her to handle. The most difficult part was that her family knew nothing about what she was going through. Her mother, her father, none of them knew anything. Even her husband's family was unaware. Her husband had insisted that they not tell anyone for 3 months. After everything was cleared up and they returned home, Deepti cried the entire way back. As soon as they entered the house, her husband remarked, "Hey, I've been hungry since morning. You've had surgery, but I haven't eaten anything. Can you make something to eat?" Deepti prepared the meal, all the while thinking how strange it all was. A few days later, they were going to get groceries. As they were passing through a deserted area, her husband suddenly increased the speed of the car. The road was completely empty. Deepti kept asking him to slow down, to drive carefully, but he ignored her pleas. She had her mobile phone in her hand, and then, suddenly, there was a loud crash. Deepti had been wearing her seatbelt, but she was still thrown forward, hitting the windshield with great force. She realized her nose was bleeding, and there was blood coming from her mouth as well. She was stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. She looked beside her, but no one was there. After the crash, their car had collided with an uncemented bus station, and the station's pillars had fallen onto the vehicle. Deepti was trapped inside the car. She couldn't see anything outside, and there was no one around to help. She still had her phone in her hand, and the last number she had dialed was her mother's. Deepti managed to call her and said, "I don't know what happened. I've had an accident, and my legs are gone." And then the call disconnected. Deepti remembered seeing a biker approaching from the opposite direction, as the road was completely empty. Summoning all her courage, she raised her hand and signaled to the biker, but her face was covered in blood. The seatbelt had also left a deep mark on her neck. Somehow, she managed to move her hand. From the outside, it seemed like the person inside the car was no longer alive. But someone noticed that there was a woman inside, and soon, people from the nearby village gathered to help her. The villagers started breaking the car, smashing the windows with stones. They tried to pull Deepti out, but because of the seatbelt, she was unable to get free. They cut the seatbelt and began pulling her from one side. One person suggested that the door might be able to open slightly, but Deepti's leg was trapped, as the dashboard had completely collapsed on her side. Despite this, the people continued their efforts to free her because she was still breathing. When the car door opened, Deepti saw that she was wearing jeans, but her thigh bone was so severely broken that it was protruding from her skin. Her legs were freed from the dashboard, and blood was continuously oozing from the wound. She felt helpless and kept asking people repeatedly, "Where is my husband? Where did he go?" But people tried to reassure her that no one else was there. Finally, the people pulled Deepti out of the car. She could only remember that her legs were twisted in a way that reminded her of ghosts or witches. Her entire body was covered in blood, and her condition was extremely critical. The police arrived at the scene and placed her in the van. Deepti kept asking, "Where is my husband?" When the van took a U-turn towards the hospital, she saw her husband sitting somewhere in the distance. She yelled at the police, saying that it was her husband, but he remained completely still, showing no reaction. Deepti thought he might have sustained severe injuries, which was why he was left behind. Upon reaching the hospital, the doctors immediately stated that surgery was necessary due to her critical condition. Her jeans were cut off, and so much blood came out that the doctors were alarmed. They said that surgery had to be done quickly, as she had lost a lot of blood. Deepti was taken to the operating room, and surgery was performed. On the third day, doctors discovered that some of her vertebrae were fractured. They also realized that her bleeding had been so severe that there was a possibility her legs might have to be amputated due to the risk of infection spreading. Her family and her husband's family came to the hospital. That evening, Deepti suddenly started bleeding profusely from her private area, and everyone feared that something serious had happened. Later, it was revealed that the bleeding was caused by a sudden shock to her abdomen due to pressure. Later, doctors found out that her nasal bone was broken, and one of her ribs was half broken, with part of it dislodged and the other part embedded inside her body. These minor injuries were initially overlooked because treating the major wounds was the priority at the time. Then, Deepti's family decided to take her out of the hospital, so she expressed her desire to meet her husband one last time. When she met him, she asked, "Are you leaving me now?" But her husband did not respond. Deepti said, "If you have to go, then go, but at least give me one last hug before you leave me." But he walked away without saying a word. After that, Deepti told her parents that she had to leave from there. She still remembered that when she was lying on the stretcher for her surgery, she saw her parents. The fear and worry were clearly visible in their eyes, as if they were thinking whether their daughter would return or not. In the hospital, Deepti told the doctor, "You can do one thing, perform surgery on both my legs at once." The doctor informed her that her blood group was rare and there might be a shortage of blood, which could make such a large surgery risky. But Deepti replied, "I can't see my parents like that again. Please go ahead with the surgery." She knew that the mental and physical pain was unbearable, but she wanted to escape this suffering at any cost. The doctor informed her that her spinal surgery couldn't be done in India, so she would have to remain bedridden. Deepti had difficulty even wearing clothes. She could only wear t-shirts or loose garments. Her father and brother would help her sit up. Slowly, she started sitting, and physiotherapy began. Her mother would massage her every day, and family members would visit her. They would see her and then leave the room in tears, but Deepti never shed a tear in front of her family. At night, Deepti would cry out in sharp pain. She would think, "All this has happened, what now?" She kept calling her husband repeatedly, but he wasn't answering her calls. She tried to contact his family, but in vain. After her surgery, they didn't visit her even once. They didn't contribute to the surgery expenses, nor did they try to find out if Deepti was alive, if her legs were saved, or if she was recovering. There was no sympathy from their side. All that was conveyed to Deepti was that her husband was suffering from depression, and that's why all this happened. Deepti couldn't understand what this depression was all about. Their life seemed fine. She had never made any demands. On the contrary, she had given up all her desires to live a happy married life. Then came a time when people started suggesting separation. Around 15 to 20 years ago, divorce was a heavy word. When a woman was told to get a divorce, the issue of divorce came later. First, there were the taunts of society, the judgment of people, and the question of family honor. No one knew the truth inside, yet all the blame was placed on her. Deepti had to decide what to do. She thought, maybe he'll come back. I should take a step. She filed a police complaint, but her husband disappeared on the very first day. Then came a day when she was limping, and her husband saw her. Deepti saw him too. That first love, first marriage, first romance. She approached him, knelt at his feet despite the pain, and said, "Take me away from here. If you hold my hand and take me with you, I will go with you. No family, neither mine nor yours, just take me away from here." Her husband replied, "If you want to come, you'll come by yourself, leaving everything behind. I won't take you with me. And you'll have to come on the condition that you'll leave your home, your life, and do things the way I want." Deepti finally had her first court hearing, and by the next date, she had decided that enough was enough. There was no time left to waste. Deepti realized that she wouldn't be able to forget all of this so easily. She thought she wouldn't be able to overcome this hardship or refocus on her life. After her marriage, her career, which had once been on a successful path, had been left behind. She had previously worked as a business development manager at an IT company, handling international clients. But now, everything was gone, her personality, her appearance, and she was confined to her bed, which had caused changes in her weight. After the plaster was removed, scars remained on her skin, and her beauty had taken a severe hit. In the end, Deepti divorced by mutual consent. After that, she started going back to the office with a friend and began applying for jobs. Deepti was happy that she could now give her life a new direction. She had faced death and come through it, a rare experience that few people endure. Now, she was determined to become something her husband had never imagined. Her husband had thought that Deepti's education was incomplete, so she decided to complete her studies. He believed her legs would be amputated, so she resolved to dance again. He thought her beauty was ruined, so Deepti decided to reinvent herself. She had lost her job, but now she would work just as hard, if not harder. She turned all those negative thoughts into positives for herself and began working on every aspect of her life, one by one. Deepti completed her education and is now a successful professional. She has a wonderful husband, and they are parents to 2 children, a son and a daughter. She is very happy with her life. She has everything she ever wanted. There's no shortage of money, love, children, a husband, or family. Deepti is now completely satisfied and happy. Deepti believes that to reach this point, you have to gather yourself and rebuild. Not worrying about what people will say or think. Perhaps that's what happened to her. Somewhere, there was divine blessing and strength with her, and after falling apart, she collected herself and stood back up again.